So Colin Bethell has worked in education and publishing for more than 25 years. He started as a teacher in the UK and in Japan, and then moved into publishing. He has extensive experience with digital and educational technology. He is the director of sales and marketing for englishbooks.jp. Englishbooks.jp is a major provider of ELT class materials from around the world. The company is a corporate sponsor of many JALT events, including the National Conference and Pan SIG. This year at Pan SIG, they are sponsoring talks by Andy Boone, Marcos Benavides, Paul Goldberg, which is here in the room, I think, and John Speary. They are deeply involved with the JALT community and support us in many ways. Okay, now about John Carle. John Carle is MW SIG program chair. He teaches at 5 universities in the Kansai area, including Kinki University, Kansai University, Setsunan University, Momoyama University, and Keiho University. He owns a language school focusing on young learners, and he is the author of the textbook, The English Gym, written under the pen name John Charles. I know a John Charles, by the way. He also owns and operates Oak Hills Press, an independent publishing house. Currently, he is working on his second textbook, The English Gym 2. All right, this is an open forum, so please don't hesitate to join in the conversation. If anyone has any questions, please put them in the chat and I will try to relay them to John or Colin during the interview. Or if you want to speak up, please use the virtual raise hand feature and I'll try to call on you. Please make sure to lower your hand afterwards. At all other times, we ask that all participants keep their mics muted, but please keep your video on if you don't mind. We all want to see your beautiful faces. You're really making me say that? Come on. Please note, however, this meeting may be recorded, and it is, and used for Pan SIG and MW SIG purposes. There will be a 5 to 10 minutes at the end of the interview for an open Q&A session. Okay, I'll let John and Colin take it from here. John?
All right, thanks, Forrest.
Thank you. Thank you for that script.
Beautiful, that was wonderful.
I should have used my English accent. No, sorry, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, just the thing about having your cameras on. You know, a lot of us are teaching on Zoom, and if you've got a completely blank screen, you're teaching into the void. So if you don't mind, if you can keep your cameras on, we can see some faces and some reactions. But if there are no faces, then it's kind of a strange and isolating feeling, but if you don't mind. Okay, before we get into our interview with Colin, I just have a couple announcements for the Material Writers SIG, and I'm going to post these in the chat as well, so you can see them. Let me see, copy. Okay, so I've put them in the chat as well, so if you want to click on the links or whatever, you can get that. But the first one, hey, Paul, you're the first announcement. You're like everywhere. Paul Goldberg, we'll be interviewing him next Saturday, May 29th. And actually, it's a joint event with the Fukui chapter, and Robert Dykes will be interviewing Paul and grilling him about his journey with X reading. So please come to that. It's a free Zoom meeting, so anyone can join, JALT or non-JALT. Just click on the links there. Okay. We are looking for a new publications chair. Okay. If anyone is interested in working with the Material Writers SIG, please contact Adam Murray, who's in the room. He's our coordinator. And you can find us on the Material Writers website, which I'll share right here. Let's see. Okay, so we do have a website here. You can find it through JALT, and I'll put that in the link in the chat as well later. Okay, and the next announcement is if anyone wants to be a member at large or just join for not as a publication chair, but help us with proofreading or reading articles or anything with the SIG, we are always looking for new members. And we will have a new publication coming out soon. Maybe Adam knows a little bit more about that. But if you have an article that you want to share with us, please do so. All right. Okay, so let's get started. Colin, are you ready?
Yeah.
You look like you're in a in a
Yeah,
JALT exhibition.
apologies to everyone. I went to the wrong location, I'm afraid. And as you can see, there's nobody here except the staff. So we're just setting up early for November. But anyway, so I'm here on Zoom instead. Yeah.
Yeah. Very good. Well, it looks like you got a lot of books there. So hopefully you'll sell, at least there's a few people back there.
That's right, there's staff though.
Okay. I'm going to share one more. This is going to be the brief slideshow. And let me copy that and put that in the chat. So if you want to see the slideshow later, you should be able to see that, I hope. Okay. But let's go to the slideshow very quickly, very briefly, before we begin. And okay, I'm just going to go through these real quick. Colin Bethell, he's the Director of Sales and Marketing at English Books Japan, and we'll be talking about, we're going to cover a lot of ground, publication, production, and distribution. Okay, so these are our main topics, and hopefully we'll get through all of them. First, we'll talk about the big picture of the industry, and we are all involved in this industry, whether we realize it or not, but as educators, this is part of our life, and it affects us in our everyday daily teaching. So we'll talk about the big picture and the different types of publishers. There's the big international publishers, domestic publishers, and also independent publishers. Printers, they are very important in the process. Without them, we wouldn't have any actual books. And it's kind of like a pipeline, and all these actors or stakeholders are vital in this pipeline. And if one part doesn't work, then the whole thing falls apart. And that brings us to the book distributors, and that's English Books Japan is one of them. There are several in Japan, but we'll talk about their vital role in getting textbooks to students. Booksellers, usually the bookstores at the universities, also play a role, and their influence changes things. And we'll talk about that. And the authors, material writers, people like us, working with publishers and distributors, and we'll have an open Q&A at the end. Okay. This is the abstract. I won't read that because it's long and not that exciting. There are a few links in the slideshow, and I'll just show them up here so that we have a bit of a background. The first one is for English Books Japan, okay? And this is their website, and you can see this is for their university books. And a lot of people in JALT are in here. So if you look through them, you'll find a lot of JALT members in their catalog. Okay. The other one I want to point to is the Material Writers SIG homepage. Okay, so please check that out. We'll have a list of the officers and what we do in the Material Writers SIG. And the final one is, this is a presentation I gave last year at the National JALT. It's a video presentation, and it talks about publishing your own work. So it's kind of a walkthrough of how to go from A to Z. And if you're new to the publication industry, it might be helpful for you to check that out. Okay. There's a link on the bottom as well to a website that I made for self-publication. This was at JALT 2019, and I believe I met Adam there for this one. And I made a website. It gives a lot of the details and helps you through the process of writing your own textbooks. Okay. And we'll stop the sharing here. All right, Colin, sorry about that. But let's get to you. Can you tell us a little bit about how you, a little bit about your background, please?
Sure. And first of all, thank you, John, for inviting me along today. And, you know, it's a great pleasure. And I think it's a great session, actually. And as part of answering your question, John and I met probably nearly 3 years ago, I suppose, and we chatted, and he had his project going, and I was at that time quite new to my current position. And we just traded information, and I think that's why we're here today, really, is because, you know, he comes from a starting out author point of view and a starting out publisher point of view, and I come from now from a bookseller point of view and a distributor point of view, both of those, but I come from a publishing background, so we've never fallen short of things to talk about, John and I. So that's sort of why this happened, and that also really gives you most of my background. I was a teacher I'm from the UK, as I'm sure you can tell by my voice. I taught in the UK for a very short amount of time as a young person, and then I realized I could have much more fun and make more money by going to Japan. So I was on the JET scheme for a while. Then I taught in a high school for a couple of years. And then I got a job working for Cambridge as a rep. And in the following 20 odd years, I worked for several different academic and professional publishers. About half of the time was in ELT, about half of it was outside of ELT. I first worked in digital publishing in 1997. And it was towers of CDs in university libraries at that time. And obviously lots of things have changed in the meantime. So I've been in and out of kind of everything in publishing. And then I worked in what they call these days EdTech, involved in a startup selling virtual reality for education, mainly for science and natural science as opposed to ELT, but there was some ELT. And then I came back into this job mainly because I got fed up with traveling and I wanted to be in Japan. And I really fell on my feet there, because in the current last year, if you were doing a traveling job, you would have very quickly been out of work, obviously. So I feel very lucky in that respect. So that's the background, John, just to sort of see where these come from. And so I must say up front, everything I say is biased to my experience. And I hope that John sort of balances that out a bit. But, you know, I'm just declaring the interest. It all comes from a certain place, and it may be a place that it's not easy for teachers every day to listen to. So that's what I hope I'm bringing along.
Yeah, well, I think the business side of education, it's part of it. And whether we're getting paid by the university or paid through a book company or, excuse me a second. Yeah. Intruder.
That's exactly
My
what
cat,
I did.
sorry.
Shut the door.
Yeah, but the business side, it does. I think it doesn't matter, you know, where it comes from. So I know you work your corporately your sponsor is English Books Japan, but you work with teachers every day and you work with universities. So you can't really separate it, I think. But speaking about that, let's get to the first question. Is can you paint us maybe a broad picture of the textbook industry pertaining to English textbooks? Especially for the Japanese university market. Who are the important players? International, domestic, independent, printers, distributors, bookstores, teachers, students, authors, and very briefly, I know that's a big question, but what are the key roles that they play?
Well, to be brief and answer the question, you know, concisely, I would say the big players are englishbooks.jp. Sorry about that. Yeah, so what I think we should do, John, there is firstly pick up on the very sort of last thing you said before the question, which is how intertwined we are, sort of what you and me do, and therefore what a lot of the delegates here do. I think that is a very important concept to carry through this session. I've learned over the years that it really has to be a partnership at all levels. So in terms of the key players, that whether they're publishers, whether they're authors, whether they're teachers who are buying the books, or the students, or the people in the middle with the sales channel or the warehousing, the whole thing really does have to work in a sort of a two-way fashion as a partnership at most levels. You know, your bookstore will go out of business without the sales into the university. And that's a very critical thing right now, which we'll come to later, I'm sure. But those bookstores are not making huge amounts of money, but they are on site and they're giving the convenience to the teachers there and the students there. And that's why they stock up on the textbooks. You know, you could go and buy them on Amazon, but Amazon is what it is. It's going to serve you in a consumer way. There's no chance of having a conversation with Amazon about, oh no, I bought the wrong book. I wanted the student book and I got the workbook. Tough, you know, you just have to return it over the post. But so in terms of key players, I think rather than dwell on that, I've mentioned as many as I can think of. And I think also it's a good time for people to start dropping questions in, because John's agenda is huge. He circulated it beforehand, and rather than get hung up on any of our questions, if you can throw your questions in as well, we can quickly mold ourselves to those questions as well, so that hopefully you all get what you want rather than me just going through an agenda. So if there are any things you would like me to expand on in terms of the big players, the big picture, then please go ahead and send in questions. Otherwise, let's move on.
Okay. Yeah, and of course, if you can keep an eye on that chat, and because it's a little confusing to do 2 or 3 things at the same time.
I was just thinking that's
just
true.
let
too.
us know.
I'll keep an eye on it. Yeah.
All right. Let me just ask about the changes in the textbook industry in Japan over the past 10 years. Have you noticed any changes in for either authors or the types of books being published or marketing?
There has been some change, but actually, to give you a concise answer, the change over 20 years has not been that huge in some respects. But having said that, there have been some significant changes. So what I'm trying to say is that there are a lot of book purchasing and use patterns that are exactly the same as when I first started in the industry in Japan. There are quite a few that still function almost exactly the same way. And yet there are innovative and different things come in, such as, X-reading with Paul. That's a very good example of how the book industry has metamorphosized in a certain way. And of course, there are, in the light of the last year, of course, everybody who's got a computer is trying to influence the industry. And that, I think that one we don't need to worry about, because that's happening probably in every industry. And we will just have to see what the result is. So I'm going to put that aside. But I mean, Paul brought his thing out probably 8 or 9 years ago. So that's a much more sort of phased and real change in the industry. But it hasn't sort of excluded, paper reader sales. In fact, it may even have increased them. It's very hard to know. So, right. So overall, you can see some changes, but there's a lot of, I don't want to call it traditional, but there's a lot of sort of standard things that haven't really changed. The one thing that you won't have seen, I think, and that I probably have seen, but you haven't, is the pattern of book purchasing. When I first started in the industry, I was a rep, and I had probably about 5 to 10 accounts that were buying 3,000 to 5,000 books off me in one go. What units, that is. That means units just means items. So it could be a combination of workbooks and CDs. I mean, I remember some of the places like Fukuoka and Nagoya where they would be buying 3,000 units of interchange or something a year.
So how has that changed now?
That almost doesn't happen anymore. There's probably about 3 universities in the country that are buying on that scale, because the structure of the English education, which you will have seen, but you may not have thought about it in the context of sales. So adoptions for books are now, I would say the average is about 30 to 50 books. So what that means, if you're writing and selling a book, or publishing and selling a book, it means you have to walk around a lot more places and talk to a lot more people to sell the same 3,000 books. Okay, but it's not a case of going to Nagoya University and having 3 meetings. It's a case of going to 35 universities and meeting 10 teachers at each one. Right.
And but basically your customers are the teachers or the department heads of those the particular faculty.
Well, again, for the sake of this session, our customers are the students in some respect, but the decision makers and the decision makers for the purchasing is very often the teacher, but it can also be, like you say, the department head. It's either an administrator or a teacher in most cases. Yeah.
Right. But how about for the writers, for the authors? I've talked to a lot of different authors, and some who've been in the industry quite a long time. And they're saying that the royalties these days are a lot less than the royalties that they used to get 10 or 20 years ago. Do you know anything about that side of the industry?
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you are ever looking for a really sort of antagonistic, conflict-ridden situation, the best thing you can do is get some really well-known authors together with some publishers in the same room, and then pour a bit of beer on it, and you'll have a really rigorous discussion. So there's a lot of opinions about what you've just mentioned. What I would say, and I've always been in sales and marketing. I've never been an editor, and I've never been an author, but I've sat on the edge of it, you know, all of my career, I suppose. So I don't even know if royalties have reduced, because it's the danger is the comparison. I mean, what are you comparing it to? If your name is Jack Richards and you're comparing it to what you got for interchange in 95 and what you're getting now, then yeah, you've got a good comparison. And I have no idea what that is, by the way. But you know, if you're new to the industry and you're just talking to people and they say, oh, it used to be like this, you may be missing a lot of variables, a lot of criteria that really is necessary to compare it. Let's remember, you know, when you do academic research, you have to know what your independent variable is, and you have to be sure you're comparing it to the right thing. Otherwise it becomes worthless. So my overall impression is I don't really think the amount of money an author takes has changed very much.
I see.
But as I say, it's difficult because you don't know what you're comparing it to. So, but
Right, and I think each situation is going to be different. What type of publishing company you're working with, whether they're global or domestic, and the reputation or the experience of the author. Those are all variables that change those. Have you noticed any? Oh, go ahead, Paul.
Can we make comments in the middle?
Yeah, that would be great.
I'll
Yeah,
just
so
say-
please, if you have comments or questions, just speak up. That would be best, I think.
Okay, what I've heard on that point is a lot of, and again, I don't know too much, but I've heard that a lot of publishers are now paying a flat fee to authors and not giving them royalties. I don't know, that seems to be the trend, that they mainly because they want to be able to control it, and also it may be economically advantageous. But I've heard that's been a big change in the last 20 years. I don't know, Colin, if you've heard that as well.
yeah, it's a really good point, actually, Paul. So if you're a best-selling author and the publisher says, I'll give you a flat fee, the author will walk away. And that's the answer to the economic thing. Yes, basically the publisher does it because it's an advantage for them and they never have to pay you again. And if your book becomes a blockbusting success, you're not getting any more money for it. So I personally would never go into a deal like that. But I'm not an author and I'm not going to be an author, so it's not relevant. But I'm very conscious of that if I do anything else that I get paid for, that I want to get paid on merit for everything I perform with. I don't want to, you know, get paid $100 and then see somebody else make 10,000.
Okay, thanks, Paul. And I think there was a question in the chat. Who is that?
Okay, that's Amy Braun.
Amy, do you want to turn your mic on?
Hi, hello, I'm
Hey.
Amy Braun, nice to meet you. My question was, it's not a textbook question. Does englishbooks.com, englishbooks.jp, do you guys also publish other materials? Or is there a market to publish English picture books in Japan? I'm thinking of making a picture book with my sister this summer. So I'm thinking she's gonna be the illustrator, I'm gonna write the content, but I have to also do like the marketing and everything. So I want a physical copy, but I might have to put it on Amazon too. So I want to see if there's a place where I can publish it in Japan.
Excellent question, Amy. John, I'm going to need you to referee me. Okay,
Oh.
If I talk too much in answer to that,
No,
just tell me
it's
to
all
stop.
yours. Go ahead, Colin.
Yeah, because, Amy, you've inadvertently covered so much of what's in John's agenda in terms of one question. So firstly, I have to qualify that englishbooks.jp is not actually a publisher. So we're not publishing in theory. In practice, we find that people like your good self, but people we've known for a long time have come to us, and we actually are starting to publish now, but it's not really out of choice. It's sort of just happened through that partnership. But we should not be called a publisher.
Okay.
And the important thing for you is that that's what you need with a picture, well, with a book, but a picture book in particular, because you'll have your illustrations. So I don't know who's doing those for you, or if you're doing them yourself. But
My sister.
Okay, great. So you've got your illustrator, and then that, you're going to need all the services of a publisher, or you do it yourself, which is a challenge, as John can tell you, where you have to sort of get the layout and everything and the design, and then you'll move on to production and printing. And that's what a publisher does. So if you or anybody was to take their project and get it accepted by a publisher who, as we know, is not going to pay you very much. But let's come back to that later, because look at the huge amount of work they have to do up front.
Yes.
And all you would have to do is write the book. That's perhaps how a publisher sees that. Now, they're not saying that it's not a lot of work, but the amount of work in bringing a book to the market is tremendous. And it's not just the writing of it. And now, if you're self-published, you're doing all of that work yourself, and you will soon appreciate the amount of work there is. But in short, to answer your question, Amy, it sounds like you need the help of a publisher, or you need to get freelancers who can help you, and basically you are the publisher, but you use freelancers to do that. But John will be full of advice for you on that, because if there's a pitfall, he knows about it.
Yeah, Amy, you could watch the video. It goes through all those steps.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
But yeah, there are a lot of players that if you're new to the industry, you don't actually realize, oh, there's the publisher, there's the author, there's the distributor, there's the printer, there's the bookstores. There's a lot of people in there, and they all each have a crucial role to play in this. And sometimes they can get confusing. So I guess English Books Japan is basically, it's a distributor.
Okay.
But like Colin said, I guess they're advising or helping people publish their works. And actually, Colin's quite helpful. I mean, he helped me quite a bit in advising me on which path to take. So you can talk to Colin as well.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, Colin,
John Carle.
let's go on to
John Carle. Sorry, we had another question.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is from Paul Rain. He's saying, has anyone published with KDP?
Hey guys,
Paul?
can you hear me? Can you hear me?
What is
Yeah.
KDP?
Yeah, I'm assuming from the tumbleweeds that nobody knows what KDP is. It's Kindle Direct Publishing. I basically experimented with it a few years ago. I published a book with KDP, and the problem that I encountered was not with the publishing. Basically, KDP is print on demand. So when the student buys the book, Amazon prints a copy and sends it to them. The problem I encountered was actually figuring out how to get the students to pay for the book, because most universities, the students have to pay through Secure. They have to, every payment has to be routed through Secure. I'm just wondering whether anyone has had any success selling their books directly to students, and how they do that.
That's a big pitfall.
Yeah, go ahead, Colin.
That's a well-trodden path. And you've described everything that is involved in that. So Amazon, I want to say this so that we remember this, another conceptual thing. When you publish, you need to really have a very clear objective at the start of your project, because then you can measure how you're going to achieve it. And publishing on Amazon is fine. But it depends on your objective. Now, if your objective is to get it into university students in Japan, it's probably not the right sales channel. But the problem you've got is that when you go through that, Amazon, because they're extremely clever with what they do, they basically become the exclusive place that book can be found. So if you want to publish it in another place, you need to give it a different ISBN, which means it's a different book, even though the content is identical. And the other problem is that distributors like us don't want to touch it because it's on Amazon, you see, because it confuses everybody. And it's a bit like when people in the old days, before Microsoft was pretty robust, you always blamed Windows. And actually it was probably your own fault because you didn't know how to use a computer, but it's Windows' fault and Microsoft's bad and I don't like them. And that's why we wouldn't want to touch it. We have quite a lot of inquiries with that.
I had the same problem, like because I went to Secure, and if it has an ISBN number, in theory they can order it, but not if it's on Amazon.
Well, they can order it, but it has to come from Amazon, and they don't get any money for that. So.
And they can't order in bulk.
Yeah, I think distributors like English Books or any distributor, they sell to the bookstores in bulk. right? So they sell at a substantial discount, so that when the bookstores sell it to the students also often get a discount through the Seikyo. So it is a relationship that is I think it's vital in the flow of books to students. So Amazon, I know some students have, like, if they've missed the deadline for ordering books, a lot of bookstores are online now. And if they miss the deadline, they can't find the book, they go to Amazon and they find a book that looks almost the same.
Yeah.
Or I've had students buy books on there and they didn't have access to the LMS because they didn't have the scratch code in there. I think maybe for Paul, right, actually you designed this for ABAX.
I did, yeah.
And so I had to call ABAX and communicate with them and get the code for the students. So there's a lot of problems if the students don't buy it through the university bookstores.
And that secondhand book market is not something publishers want to encourage. You know, students buying used books.
Well, secondhand that's a different issue. But of course, I mean, if it's a bit like used cars, really, isn't it? I mean, if you're Nissan, you want people to buy new ones, but it can live together. There's no problem with it being there.
I was going to say something. I think Susan had a question or a point.
And then Paul Goldberg had one as well.
Now, I just recently published a textbook on KDP. And that's, let me tell you why before, because our school went down to once a week, 50-minute classes. And most textbooks out there are way too big. And I feel bad for the students having to pay a couple of thousand yen when we're down to almost like a high school schedule of 16 classes for one class and 50 minutes each class. So I was experimenting over the past couple of years by putting a textbook on Moodle. And then this year I decided, you know, I think I'll get some money for this. And I did KDP. And my school doesn't have an issue about the students buying directly from Amazon. And how I solved the payment for it, I told the kids to go to the local convenience store and buy yourself a Amazon gift card, and then you can buy it online, which they did. And then other than the only problem I had is the formatting. I'm still in a learning curve on this one, on the different kinds of levels that they are. And I didn't go with the print edition because the printing costs were just phenomenal in Japan. That's why I didn't go with the print version. I was able to charge, as I said, I'm a newbie at this. I charged the students 700 yen a term for my textbook with a link to a downloadable workbook that I had on Google Drive. So cheap and easy. But as I said, it's all, if it was a 90-minute class, I usually go with a print textbook, but this was a 50-minute class now, very short term. I thought this was the most economical way to go about it. And now everything's online at my university for the past year, and now we're back online again. So that's my experience with KDP.
But your objective was very clear there, Susan. You know why you were doing it, and you seem to have achieved your objective. So that works perfectly well, in my opinion.
Hey, Paul, you said you wanted to say something?
Just, I was surprised when I created X Reading. I thought it's an online system. Students will pay directly. And I discovered just what you're talking about. It's not that simple in Japan, that everything has to go through the Seikyo. Fortunately, someone gave me the idea, even though it's an access card, put an ISBN number on the back and you're good to go. And that's all it really took. But at the same time, my main point I was going to get to, but the pandemic has totally changed things, where I think now students, now these universities are regretting in a way that they have, this students have to come to the bookstore because they're not set up to deal with it at all. I guess, Colin, I mean, just from our experience working together, students who want to buy X Reading now have to have cards and then codes sent directly from you guys, because it's, it's all changed from a year ago, 2 years ago now.
Absolutely. Just to share an opinion, the way I see the whole COVID crisis situation in industry terms, and probably in education terms as well, is I just see it as an accelerator. It's accelerated so much, it would have taken teachers a lot longer to get online, not because of the teachers necessarily, but it also would have taken our industry a lot longer to do things digitally and to get students buying their own books. So but all of this has just been pushed forward so quickly now. Yeah, so Paul's absolutely right. There's a lot of individual sales now over the internet from us to students.
Okay, let's
John,
go
there's two more questions, John.
Okay, go ahead.
You want to do that or move on? And
no,
do,
we'll take the
ask-
questions and then we'll move
Okay.
on. That's fine.
Okay, first question is by Darren. Darren, are you there? Go ahead.
Hi, hello. So I was just wondering, what are the most important factors if you want to get a play published? You know, if it's intended for drama in the classroom, for example. So it might have like a very simple play, and in the back would have a translation.
Again, if I can jump in, I mean, the first thing with any publishing plan is to have your publishing objective. Okay, you can keep that in your head for now. It's just a rhetorical question, but everyone who publishes should have their objective. Why are you doing this? You know, why are you trying to do it? Because there's so many different ways to answer that. It could be just for a finite set of students, which I think Susan was doing. Again, it's rhetorical. I'm not quizzing you on it, but you know, it sounds like she was just publishing for, in the first case, as an experiment to her own students to see if it would work, and then she might move on to another project. So she doesn't want to pump loads of money into it, which is very clever. And she just wants to see how it goes and make a decision for the future. Now, if your play was a bit like that, then you'd want to do it all low key and certainly not spend lots of money on design and printing and stuff. And again, if the play is something you're writing yourself, that's great. That's all your material. I mean, one of the best things for publishing anything, it doesn't really matter if it's a play, as long as you know what your objective is, then you just want to test it out as cheaply as possible, really. Make sure it works and make sure there's no mistakes, and there will be tons of mistakes. Because every author I've ever met, it seems to be a perfectionist, and they publish something and immediately want to change it. And I think that's kind of a good thing. It's, but what I'm saying is piloting and experimenting is a really good way to start. And something like a play is different to a regular textbook. You know, if we talk about a general English textbook, I think we're fairly clear on what that is, so we can make a few assumptions perhaps. But when it's more specific, you have to be a bit more clear about your objective and pilot it, you know, test it out each step before you shell out lots of money.
So in my case, it's more about, I just see like there's a need, because at our school, we were using Pop Stars and Star Taxi, and now that's becoming, I don't think they're dated necessarily, but they were written 20 years ago. So I think there's, maybe teachers are looking for something that's a bit newer, published more recently.
Sure. So I think to start, I mean, I don't know the answer to that, but I think, you know, if it was me, I'd probably use it with my own students, which you've probably done already, and then find a few friendly colleagues somewhere else in the country and give them some units to pilot and see if it works, because you're testing out your theory, just like academic research. And if the test results come back positive, then you might want to spend a bit of money on it and move to the next stage. And then the publishing process would be very similar to any other paper book, if it is paper.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, Forrest, let's keep going with the questions. I think it's fine because people want to know these, and this is much more specific than what I would do.
Okay,
so,
great. If you turned up at the weekend, let's give you what you want. Yeah.
All right. Well, there's I think there's I'll check. There's a couple other chats, but right now I've got two questions ready. The first one is Paul Rain. Says, can an 18-year-old Japanese student have their own credit or debit card? I assume they can.
I don't know that I'm qualified.
So we're talking about students buying stuff directly online. I'm just wondering, because the government's reducing the adult age from 20 to 18. And I'm wondering if that means that, you know, Japanese first-year freshmen can then have their own credit card or debit card. Anyone know that?
No.
Nobody knows. Okay.
the kids are too young.
There's alternative ways to pay for things on Amazon. You can go pick things at a conveni. You can pay at the conveni. There's so many options. All the kids have this PayPay app on their phone, which is just like a debit card. So I don't think, you know, just thinking about a credit card or a debit card, they have everything on their cell phone now.
So you said that you asked them to buy a coupon. That's something that I looked into, but that means you have to align the price of your book exactly with the value of the coupon.
No, I didn't, because everybody uses Amazon. So I think the minimum amount of the gift card they can buy is like 1,500. I had no issues with this whatsoever. Actually, I felt it wasn't my problem for them. It's up to them to figure out how to buy it.
So your book costs 700 yen, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so they're left with a good chunk of change to spend on something on Amazon that they want to buy, but
bonus.
But
sounds like a great way to con your parents.
My university wouldn't. I don't think they'd be happy with that. Like, you're leaving the student with this money that they don't necessarily want to spend on Amazon, but they have to.
It's none of their business, actually. It's actually none of the university's business.
Okay. I like your attitude, Susan. Great.
I wish I, yeah.
They're adults. They're adults. Most of them are living alone. As I said, they probably know more about an application like PayPay, where they can buy things. So I would concern myself.
Let's move on, okay? Because I think we are stuck on this page. Let's
the New Yorker.
Let's switch to the old school printers. Okay, so if they're one of the key players, right? You need to, if you're printing an old-fashioned book like paper made from trees, you need to contact printers. Do you ever help, like say, independent authors or people who are new to the industry connect with printers? And what are the costs of actually printing a book? Susan was saying it was too high for her purposes.
Okay, so to answer that one concisely, as I've said before, we're not actually a publisher, but our partnerships have sort of made us into half a publisher. So with some of the people we've worked with for a long time, we, and also as our company has developed, we have found ways to establish an economy of scale. And one of those would relate to printing. So with certain projects, we do get involved in printing, and there are some projects that we own ourselves anyway. So that we are effectively the publisher, I suppose. So yes, and we can also advise people, but we are not a printer contractor. We're not a. There are companies in the world, I don't know of any in Japan, that do publish for people. You know, they sort of, you write it and then we publish it and then we take it to a publisher. There's companies around the world that do that. We're not one of those companies. The funny thing is, one day we might become one, but generally printing in terms of costs, it depends how big the book is, of course, but let's think of it this way, that you're starting out with your new book, you're likely going to be quite frightened about how many you're going to sell. So you're going to print a small number, say hundreds. That's going to cost you a fortune, because you could end up paying, I mean, typically depends on the book, of course, but you might pay 900 yen a unit to buy that book, print that book. But if you can print 3,000 of them, you'll be getting it for 600 yen or 400 yen, depending on what the book is. So the more you print, the cheaper it gets per unit, but you have to shell out the money up front. So typically, as an author starting with one regular sized book, you're looking at somewhere between 500,000 and 1 million yen to get your book into printed form into somebody's warehouse.
Right. Well, just to give some perspective, I just printed 3,000 books, and the cost per unit for a 144-page full color book in Japan was a little under 300 yen per unit. So you'll have to do the math, but it's a lot more expensive if you print less than 1,000, double or triple the cost. Do you ever find any difference between printers in Japan or printers, the quality, let me just say, quality of different printers from different countries? Someone was mentioning Star Taxi. I know who wrote that book many years ago. Theo, I think it was. But people print from either Korea or China or India or in Japan. Is the quality of the product any different from your point of view?
I would say that it not by country, but the printer you choose is very important. Just like with any other company that you select, because quality can vary. But on the other hand, you also, to control your costs, you will also, go with different qualities of paper. And one of the variations, so if you're consuming a book, if it was a book that you're using but you didn't write, that quality may not be because the printer is bad. It may be because the author didn't have any money and printed it on cheaper paper. You know, you don't know if you're just consuming it. But if you're writing it and authoring it and publishing it, then you make those decisions and then you have to live with them. Having said that, I'm generally in Japan, I would say the standard is, as it is with pretty much everything else, the standard is very high, but the price is pretty high as well, generally speaking. But that's, I mean, we're used to that in Japan anyway. But if you go overseas, you can get it cheaper, but not because it's Korea or India or anywhere else, but just because it's a different company, you need to sort of quality test them first.
Yeah, thank you for that, Colin. Let's talk about book distributors, and this is English Books Japan. There are several in Japan. Yours is one of them. I'll mention another company just for balance. Nelly's is another big name, but there's also Japanese local ones. I see a lot of books going through, but with Tohan. I think they're one of the biggest companies, and I see truckloads of books with Tohan on the side. What do they do? Who are they, and how does this affect us as educators?
Okay, so a lot of it doesn't really affect you, I would say, but just for reference, I mean, a whirlwind tour of this. Nippon and Tohan are basically the Japanese duopoly in the book trade for Japanese books, but we're talking about English language teaching books, which might be Japanese or they might be English, and I saw a question in the chat about that. It's determined by the ISBN. So you've got several different categories of books. So Tohan and Nippon, if it's anything that's going into a regular Japanese bookshop, just imagine everything about it is Japanese in terms of its culture, the book, that is, whether it's written in English or not doesn't matter. But if it's just going to be in the local bookstore in a small town in Hokkaido, it will have to go through those two distributors, and they virtually control everything in the book trade downstream of them. So a publisher will speak to them, and then after that it's just controlled. It's a very, very set routine. Most of the ELT books operate in a slightly different place, and they generally operate in one of two places. They're either a Japanese ISBN, which means they can go through the Japanese book trade, or they can go through very, very easily through Japanese distribution networks, such as Maruzen and Kinokuniya, something like that. Or they're foreign books, which means their ISBN is from another country, in which case they are treated differently. They can certainly go through the channels, but they're actually a separate channel called Yosho, which is the foreign book publishing term, as opposed to Washo, which is if it has a Japanese ISBN. So a lot of the books we handle are published by people like your good selves, and they actually have Japanese ISBNs. So they're actually Washo, they're actually Japanese publications, and they can easily slip through any channel in Japan. But the most used one for ELT is a sort of educational channel through somebody like, Kinokuniya, Maruzen, because they have all the seikyos in your campuses.
Right. So we have a small publishing house, and we usually try to do our business directly with Maruzen or Kinokuniya, but often we'll get calls from Tohan and trying to I guess distribute the books through them. So there's a lot of players, and they all play their part. But let me just ask you one question. I know there's publishers, there's distributors. You're a distributor. Who orders the prints? Like when you're working with a publisher, does the publisher order the prints and deliver to your warehouse, or how does that work in terms of volume of like having a stockpile of books?
Okay, I think it's important to qualify what we are first. We are a distributor, but we are also a bookseller.
Okay, so both. That's right. Yeah, sorry.
We absolutely sell retail as well, mainly through our online site, but we will sell to teachers. We also sell to consumers and students and the like. We also sell retail of educational toys, which is a completely separate part of our business. So we have several different identities. So with the distribution, the book distributor identity in mind, we work with different publishers. We kind of work with every publisher. So the large publishers, obviously, like, you know, Cambridge, Oxford, Cengage, that lot, that's kind of, we don't touch their books as such, we just handle them and sell them. But with what we call our partner publishers, which are people that we have contracts with and for selling and marketing and all the rest of it, then in some cases we get involved in the printing, and that's usually because that partnership is quite a deep partnership. We know the people over time, and you know, we work with them, and we are part of the whole sort of ecosystem of their publishing. We are not the publisher, but we, as I say, we may well help with an economy of scale. And that's a two-way thing as well, because over the years, many of those publishers have helped us with certain things as well. And we come back to that, you know, key concept of partnership in publishing.
Okay, so
yeah.
So some of those partnerships are exclusive with your company, or do they have partnerships with other companies similar to yours for distribution?
Okay, so we've got a catalogue, which you can't see because my virtual background won't allow it. I'll come back to that. But we have a paper catalogue. It's also online. Anything in that catalogue is exclusive to us in terms of wholesale distribution. But any retailer can sell it, but they would be buying it from us. And you mentioned Nelly's, they have the same arrangement with some other publishers. And then there's a few other companies like that too. So there's exclusive publishers to a given distributor, and there's non-exclusive. Right. And that's, you know, an obvious answer would be, say, Cengage is non-exclusive because they sell through every channel, and they have their own office here, and they sort of manage discussions with all the distributors. Okay,
so for the partners who do have an exclusive partnership with your company, I guess you have a warehouse with a stockpile of books for each title. Is that correct, or is the stockpile kept somewhere separately?
No, we've got three, might be four actually, warehouse locations. One of them, the biggest one, is owned by us, and it's our office as well in Miyazaki. And then we've got three other contract warehouses. Two of them are at ports to help the import and mainly import of books. And then there's contract one out in the sticks near Tokyo as well, which is sometimes full and sometimes not so full. And to be honest, we try to keep it not so full, so it costs us less.
Right. All right. I think, Forrest, maybe we can take a couple questions now and
okay,
where they lead us.
So the first one is Melvin. Melvin, do you want to ask your question now?
Hello. Yeah, I have two questions for Colin, but before that, I'd like to say a quick hello to my former colleagues before I retired, Adam and Forrest and Paul. Okay, nice to see you again.
Yeah.
All right. First question, Colin, is which has the largest share of the university textbook market? Japanese publishers, for example, Kenseido or Seibido, or foreign publishers, for example, Oxford, Pearson, and so on?
You may not realize it, but that's a very complicated question. So to answer that question, you've got to look at three different markets, I think. You've got to look at the total market for Japan, meaning anybody in Japan who could buy and potentially would buy one of those books. Then you've got to look at your sort of potential market, because, you know, a farmer in Hokkaido is never going to buy either a Kenseido book or an Oxford book. It's just not going to happen because the subject matter is not interesting to them. So they're not really in your potential market at all. So then you're really talking about anybody studying English in Japan or anybody with some vague interest in these books. But again, that's a huge amount of the population and is not very helpful. So I think the most helpful thing is to look at your true market.
My market would be, excuse me, the university students. Right. Especially the first or second year, you know, required English courses.
That's right. So then you've narrowed down your population to a very, very finite amount of people. And then from the last time I did that actual research, which was a while ago now, it's more than 5 years ago, because it takes a lot of work, and you never know if it's correct even then. But the Japanese publishers were actually quite a small fraction of it. But the trouble is, you've got another market within a market there, because you cross this line between books that have Japanese language inside them and books that are purely English. And there are books from Kinseido that are pure English, as opposed to what you might think is a Western small publisher that's got books like, say, BTB Press has got Japanese in it. So which one is Japanese, and how do we answer that question? It's a really complicated question and difficult to answer. I think the best way to think of it is that think of all these publishers that are in that market, the publishers themselves and the materials they offer, and then think about what categories there are and what categories are appropriate to your particular line of questioning. So if you're thinking of publishing a book, for example, you simply need to look at that area of publishing and see what's there. So in the university, let's say the mandatory English for first and second years, that's the biggest section of that market probably, and there's a lot of variation in there. And even amongst the people here today, there's probably some people who will outlaw Japanese language in the books, L1, and other people that will insist on it. So it becomes even more complicated to answer that question. So I would say, I mean, if it's a publishing, if you're motivated by publishing with that question, then it's really a case of honing down the market that your objective is launching into and making a decision based on those specifics.
I see. Okay, so thank you. My second question is, so among the textbooks that you sell, which are the best sellers in each category? Your best-selling course books, for example, or conversation books or culture textbooks? Not everything, just a few examples we do.
Yeah, I mean, again, there's such a, we've got 60,000 ISBNs that sell constantly from all publishers. So I'm not quite sure what you're looking for there, because there's obviously, we sell everything. So I don't actually know for sure, but from the general sort of memory of the statistics, I mean, the best sellers are probably the same as the ones that you think, you know, things like Interchange and not so much Headway here, but, and then in the kids market, you've got things like Let's Go, the Cengage series is at high. That, I don't know that that's what you're looking for though, is it?
Just wanted a sense of the more popular books.
Yeah, I mean, again, I can rank them all statistically, but I would say we've got distinct categories of the what I would call mainstream publisher books.
Right.
The volume of those is much greater because everybody knows them. And in fact, for anybody in this room who's looking into publishing, you know, that is your massive marketing hurdle, is to become known. You know, marketing message, getting it out there. You may have a fantastic book, it may be the best book ever published, but if nobody knows about it, they won't buy it, and they won't know, they won't place an order for it. And so within our small band of publishing, I mean, there's a few books like Perceptia Press Scraps is an extremely good seller, but we're not comparing that with Interchange. You know, that's a completely different ballgame. The BTB Press books are selling quite well. In the kids area, we've got something called Elf Learning, which sells very well. But again, you don't compare that to the Let's Go or We Can.
Okay, Forrest, I think we had one more question on the.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
Yes, we did. So next is Todd Buchans. Todd.
Hello. Hi, thanks. Yeah, actually, I'm kind of going to amend my question a little bit. So I'm going to ask you to put on your thinking cap, or your crystal ball here. So a lot of publishers these days are offering audio free without a paywall. You can download it. Other books, you have to have the access code. Some are doing free access material. Some people have their LMSs, which is a problem for the teachers because it's an extra layer of management, and they can be costly, and sometimes they just don't resonate with students. We have the problem of we're using the textbook model, and now we are doing stuff online. So maybe PDFs, it's PDFs versus paper. Look, what do you think is working, and what do you think, what trend is going to basically evolve into the future in terms of paywall, non-paywall, maybe hybrid books, paper books only? LMSs, stuff like that?
First of all, if you're going to put a lot of time into creating some intellectual property, never ever circulate it as a PDF. It's the most dangerous thing you can do. Well, no, the most dangerous thing would be doing it in a Word document, I suppose. But funnily enough, nobody ever does that. But people will entertain the fact of a PDF, which I don't understand, because you're just giving it away. And you spent a lot of time writing that. So there are lots of ways now to publish electronically in fairly safe forms that are digitally rights protected. There's quite a lot of that, and you can buy that from several different places, and a lot of publishers are developing it themselves. And obviously, I mean, Paul with X Reading, he's got to guarantee the safety of whatever he's publishing on behalf of other publishers. So he's got a system there to protect that. In terms of all the, so that's really just protection of your intellectual property. When you come to things like listening, I mean, that's a great place. I mean, that's been going on for years, that CDs, well, tapes originally were always like 4,000 or 5,000 yen when the textbook is 3,000. A lot of people always resented paying for the CDs and the tapes, and now even a download. And the internet world, the way it's moved on, has meant that, unfortunately, well, if you're in business, unfortunately, people go online and they expect everything to be free, and that's a worldwide expectation these days. But if you're trying to make money out of it and you're paying IT people to deliver a platform, you can't afford to make it and give it away for free. So there's a real dilemma which has been accelerated by the current COVID crisis, because now everybody in publishing and probably every other industry is throwing their time and money into technology, and they have no idea what's going to be successful. So having sat on the outside of this for a long time, and as I said at the start, I was, as a young sales rep, I was selling towers of CDs. Each CD was costing $30,000 US. Into libraries, mainly in Australasia and Asia from the UK. So, you know, a tower of 10 of them is costing $300,000. So that was a long time ago, and things have changed now. All of that material is now online, but it is online at a high price. So to try and answer your question, I would say the thing that I've learned is to just stand back and watch and make decisions for yourself that make sense, and don't be put off by the white noise of what's going on in the technology world. Because when I look back, there's so many things that have disappeared that were going to be the best thing ever invented. And there's a few things that are, and it really is only a few things that have consolidated very, very clearly. And the best advice I can give you is that I think, based on purely my own experience in publishing in academia, is that every publisher was trying to invent its own platform then for online journals. And journals were still in print and online. Well, they were on CD at that time. But now they are aggregated through a sort of Google-esque sort of platform. And I'm pretty sure that's the direction everything will move in. It's standardization, because people like us, we don't want to be using 10 different platforms for our daily job. We want to be using as few platforms as possible.
Right. Yeah. No, actually, I think that's the biggest problem, is that they spend all this money. My university uses a lot of these LMSs, and you think, gosh, this costs a lot of money to make, and it creates a level of management. You feel bad for the publishers, actually, because that was a lot of time and resources. But if it bombs, it distracts from the book, actually. So I was just wondering, maybe, do you see, like, I don't know, like what are the publishers thinking? Like, do you think they're going to do more LMSs, fewer LMSs? Like, what's the future going to be?
I think the future is going to be Paul Rain.
Yeah, well, Paul's got it right. Exactly. I was going to bring up Paul. Like, I think the thing is because Paul he's a stakeholder in his LMS, and he's tending to it all the time. And I think that's maybe the problem, is the publishers, they just outsource it. And maybe that's why the quality is so bad. I mean, Paul's on it every day, you know, so.
Indeed.
You've got to be careful with, for the sake of this group, publishers are a very diverse group of people, and large multinational publishers will be making decisions in boardrooms in other countries. whereas smaller publishers will be, in the control of their single CEO probably, and it may even be just one or two people making decisions. And those decisions are, especially if they're localized, so if that company is in Japan, then those localized decisions at the top of that company are very likely to be more appropriate for Japan than anything from a large publisher. I'm not saying they can't do it, but it's just they're so far removed, and their decisions are, their objectives of their decisions are global, not regional. So they probably aren't taking into consideration as many things. So you really ought to think, I think we should always think about what publisher we're talking about to sort of answer that question. If we lump the publishers together, we create problems for ourselves in thinking.
Colin, I think let's move on to the last part. I'm sorry, Todd, to cut you off.
No, thank you.
Okay. We only got a little bit more time, so I want to get to the last part is independent publishers or independent writers. How can they work with your company? What services do you provide, and how's that business model work?
Okay, so we are, as we've established, a distributor and a bookseller. And sometimes we're an exclusive distributor, sometimes we're a non-exclusive distributor. So that means that we can hopefully handle any book. In theory, we should be able to source any book in the world that has an ISBN and get it to a customer in Japan. That's what we should be able to do. And we do it in many different ways. The most relevant ways here would be, let's take the exclusive publishing relationships. So that's when somebody has published their own book, or a small publisher has published their own books, and they are taking responsibility for that. And they negotiate with us the arrangement, and then we take the stock into our warehouse. So we're sitting on the stock for Japan, and we can sell it to wholesalers and retailers and customers themselves as well. So that's one way. Another way is that we have, sort of just marketing relationships with people. So we're not handling their book exclusively, but we may be, in close contact with them. So typically any of the big publishers in Japan, and somebody like ABAX, who is a smaller publisher in Japan, but very much established. So we talk to their offices. And then if people are trying to start up, which I think may be the most appropriate category here, then, I mean, we're happy to talk to people, but we have to go through quite a detailed process. So there are, let's pull from today's session, there's already been mention of about 3 different stages here. One where somebody is already published on Amazon and wants to do something with us, which is not particularly attractive because you've basically got 2 different channels with 2 different ISBNs for what is effectively the same book. There's another one where somebody has progressed quite a long way with their project. Basically, they've decided what they're going to do. And then we have to work out whether we are really the best partner for them with their objectives and their very advanced project. And then there's the person, which we haven't really spoken much today about, is conceptualizing what they're going to write, but they haven't actually put pen to paper yet. Or if they have, it's just notes and, not random, sort of general ideas. And that's an exciting thing because there's some malleability in that, flexibility. You can talk to that person and say, well, what you're suggesting doesn't sound that great, but if it was to be this, it might be better for us. Are you willing to sort of work with us in that way?
Right. Do you have a specific criteria that when you look at, if someone brings you a book, say, and say, I want this to be in your catalog, do you go through a process of deciding whether that book would fit the catalog?
Well, it's very simple and very commercial. It's really, we need to understand the publishing objective. We need to see a proposal for sales, and we need to be able to prove that, we can make money and not lose money by having this relationship. It's that simple, really. And anybody else in the industry would have exactly the same approach, I imagine.
Sure. So let's say an author does have a partnership with your company. How does the university bookstore, or how does the the teacher orders through the bookstore, and the bookstore, how do they contact you, or how do they find out that you have a warehouse or a stockpile of this book? How does that process work?
Okay, so behind the scenes, there's a network, as again, I'm sure there is for pretty much any industry, say supermarkets. I'm sure it's similar there. So over the years, we've become quite a major player in that network. So bookstores that deal in English language teaching materials either know about us, or they know another distributor that they buy stuff from us. You know, our exclusive stuff goes to that distributor. So there's a very established network, and it's not that huge really in terms of different names. I mean, people that you will know, people like Marazen and Kinokuniya, they have distributorships as well, and they purchase from us and we purchase from them. And there's other distributors that, you know, Yoshi, JPT, you may not know them because they're kind of hidden. They're not retailers, so they're just back there in the industry. But you know, there's a handful of them. We've mentioned Tohan and Nippon, which is not great. They're not huge for ELT because they're much more sort of consumer based in, you know, for regular bookshops with Japanese language. But they're there. You know, they can buy them too.
And do you ever have a contact with the Japanese ISBN agency or the Japan Book Publishers Association? Do you have to deal with them in any way?
Well, absolutely, because we assign ISBNs to many of the books. So we have to buy them from the agency and abide by their rules and publish books. And yes, and a very common situation is somebody comes to me with a publishing project and I ask them if they have an ISBN, and they often don't. So I ask them to go and get one. And if we work with them, sometimes we assign it for them.
Okay, so are you actually the publisher then? If you assign the
well, on paper we would
you own
be,
the
yeah.
ISBN. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Officially, we would be the publisher. Yes.
So
but we didn't actually do the work. Yeah.
Okay, but so you have the rights to that book then?
No, because we have a contract with the people who published it. Yeah.
I see. Okay. But yeah, your company would be registered with the Japan Book Publishers Association, I assume?
Sure. Yeah.
Right. Okay. All right. Maybe we'll go into the very last part. Could you share maybe a success story of either a small company or an independent author who has worked with your company and been successful? And also, if there have been, you don't have to name names, but if there's some story or an example of something that didn't go so well and why that happened.
Yeah, I think it's difficult for me to talk about, especially people or very small groups without their permission. But if you were to look at our catalogue or our web page with the small publishers that we represent exclusively, you know, some of them are the ones that are successful, I would say, are the ones that we have a really strong partnership with. The ones that we talk to and they talk to us, and more importantly, listen to and they listen to us, because it's quite a complicated thing to get probably anything, but in this case, an English language book, through a network and market it at the same time, through a distribution network and market it at the same time. And the work of marketing is huge for any given item. You need to get recognized. And when you look at how many books we handle, even exclusively, I think it's about 6,000 items exclusively. The company's got 40 people in it. So even if they are all in marketing, they don't have enough time to market every book, not to the intensity that the author would like. So we have to make, you know, very difficult decisions about how we approach marketing, because marketing is one of the biggest holes in the ground to pour money into and never get anything back. And for example, my take on advertising budgets is that at least 50% of every advertising budget I've ever had is a waste of money. The problem is I don't know which half, and that's why I'm spending 100%.
Okay.
So success is about the partnership, the relationship.
Right. So the success stories are the small companies or the people that connect with you and kind of build a relationship
Yeah.
So that they can sell more books, I guess. This would be the
Yeah.
ultimate.
It's a bit like a job interview, which in turn is a bit like finding a life partner to get married to. You're trying to find a long-term relationship. And if it doesn't work, the correct thing to do is not to go ahead. So it's about that contract negotiation in the first part, you know, is work out what we can do that helps and work out how this publication fits into what we do best. And if that doesn't work, then we should not work together. So it's really the same as anything else, you know.
Yeah, and there's a lot of I don't know, junctures to getting, you know, from the book is finished and printed to actually getting it into the classroom. There's a lot of steps along the way, and I think distributors, you know, play that vital role. Okay, we've got about 15 more minutes. I just want to ask one question that kind of bugs me, Colin. It's a fax machine. And I know this sounds odd, but when sometimes we get orders from book sellers via fax, and you know, I think my cats are coming in. Whenever the fax goes up, my cats go crazy. So does your company still have to deal with faxes?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm a bit like you, John. My theory is that there's some kind of deal going on behind closed doors that keeps the fax industry in business, and it's basically the Japan book trade is the only customer in the world for fax machines, I think. So now it's very odd, but we do it through the computer. But we do have a fax machine, but we send faxes through a computer because we have to, because that's the way a fair amount of bookstores want to communicate.
Yeah. Okay. Let's Forrest, we've got a few more minutes. Are there any questions? Maybe you could pick a few.
Yeah, okay. So I guess Paul had several questions. Paul, maybe you could ask a few, and Tosco as well. So if we can add both of those questions in there. So
sorry, there's a little mini side conversation going on in the chats about publishing digital textbooks, and Toshiko mentioned, could a digital textbook be printable? So you'd be getting the students to print out their own textbook, which would be an interesting idea. I'm more along the lines of, you know, keeping it fully digital and pushing it out to students' smartphone, tablet, or laptop. But publishers that I've talked to don't really see an appetite for fully digital textbooks per se. It's a textbook plus LMS. And I'm just wondering whether we can, you know, collapse that divide between textbook and LMS and just have a digital interactive textbook.
Well, that already exists. All of those things exist. The funny thing is that it's about finding, you know, connecting with the right things. So everybody in this room probably has got some experience of finding digital things online that relate to published books. And there's some that I know and there's some that I don't know, but definitely the spectrum is covered, and this last year has again accelerated everything. So it's difficult to see the wood for the trees now. But there are some very, very established names in that area, and I think it's quite clear that some companies are moving in a direction that will probably continue, whereas others are probably just not going to go anywhere. And the upsurge in a lot of smaller companies, let's say publishers, but they don't have to be, making digital items now, unfortunately, I don't see how they can all survive. Because I don't think teachers will ever consent to using that many different systems. And in terms of just publishing, I mean, I've dropped my email in the chat. If anybody wants to ask me about digital publishing, I can certainly help you more specifically. Just don't send PDFs out.
If I can add, I just think teachers themselves are just wary about having an all digital textbook. There's too many potential things that can go wrong when you do that, whether, you know, it's a dead battery or a technical issue. So I think that's going to be, and Paul, in my opinion, that's probably going to be the biggest obstacle.
And one thing I want to add to that is a lot of things that are online, students just hit Google Translate. I mean, unless you've got some kind of wall up there, but they find ways. Right now, it's pretty easy just to translate everything. So all of your language lesson plans are useless. And if you do have some kind of script in there to block that, some students, they can get around it, but it's probably not too many. But a lot of the websites that are out there, easily translated. So if you Google Forms, Google Translate, it's just like, it's useless. I don't know why people do Google Forms so much, because the students, they're not looking at the English, I think.
We actually just integrated a translation prevention measures on ABAC's LMS actually, because we had that request. But yeah, if you're a determined hacker or script kiddie, you can get around it. But the opportunistic, student who just clicks to Google Translate, they won't be able to do it. But.
Right. I've been using another service for testing, Test Moz, and they have that script in there as well. And
Yeah.
I've noticed my scores from before Corona are comparable to the scores that I'm getting now. So I know they're not translating it because they're getting the same scores. But I've seen students just, everything's all in Japanese, and it's just a waste of time. So that's great, Paul, that you have that on there. And I think Paul Goldberg, you have that on your X reading as well.
Yes, because I got such a delightful email from a teacher saying, "Oh, we're so happy you've added Japanese books to X reading." I was like, well, I don't recall that. Several
I
years
thought you were
ago.
rendering everything as an image on X reading, no?
Sorry?
I thought you were rendering the books as images, not actual text.
No, it's all text, and that's how we count the words. But we do also block students from copying and pasting to stop them from putting it into Google Translate. And then we had to add the script that you mentioned that stops them, the browser from actually doing it as well.
Yeah.
Edge just added the same feature that Google Chrome has. So now anybody who had that script has to add it for Edge as well.
Okay, Forrest, any more questions that are popping up?
No, I think just want to check, Paul. Tushko, did you have all your answers, your questions answered? Maybe so.
Did she leave the room?
Yeah, I think she did. Yeah, she's not here. So
All right, Colin, let's get back to, we've got a few more minutes. I don't know if you can give us specific numbers in terms of finances, I guess. But if an independent publisher were to come to you, what kind of deal could they maybe start with, like as a basic level? Please, publish my book. It fits your catalog. What's the breakdown in terms of percentages for retail sales or wholesale?
Okay, so normally things work in some kind of percentage from the retail price. So you've got your book, you've got your objective, your expected market, you've worked out how many you think you're going to sell in a year, and from that you derive your market price. Let's say, for the sake of arguments, 2,500 yen or something, which is a classic sort of textbook price. So we have to work out what we're trying to do with it. And in most cases, it would be to sort of manage it for sales into Japan. Well, I don't know if any of you have looked at our website or those of any other company selling books, but some of them promise you they'll give you 20% discount. And we suggest that we'll give you up to 20% discount, depending on what you buy from us. So if we're giving away 20%, we're obviously going to buy it less than 80%, right? So we don't lose money. So therefore, how much do we need? Well, if we sell it into any of this network, guess what? They want money from us. And if you want it in a bookshop, we will be giving away at least 40% of the price of the book. That's what we would have to give away. So that means we're right down near sort of 40, 50, 60%, depending exactly on what it is. So depending on the project, the publisher is giving us somewhere between 40 and 60%, depending on where that is, so that we can sell it and still make some money. And if anybody wants to make some money, maybe go into a different industry. You can make money from large scale. So, if you're an author publisher and money is your objective, you must scale up. It's the only way to make yourself a lot of money.
So what would you consider large scale sales in a year?
Well, I mean, again, it depends what you're basing it on, but I mean, for us, when we've got the bookseller hat on, we're very happy with all the big names in the industry, because we can sell those publishers' books for them, the whatever, Headway or American Headway or Let's Talk or Let's Go, in anything really is but those are, you're talking about tens of thousands of units, but any of the small publishers is very unlikely to hit 10,000 units. I mean, I think the target, it depends on your publishing objective. This is so important, because if your target is to make money, you need to be selling tens of thousands of books. So you need to publish the book that will sell that. But most small publishers are not in it just for money.
Sure.
They're in it for another reason, and that their publishing objective is to make some money, yes. But they're not expecting to give up their job necessarily immediately. Once you become successful with 2 books, then you can start becoming a publishing company and giving up your job. And if Paul in X Reading doesn't mind me saying, I seem to remember that he was working as a teacher for quite a long time before he made the leap. And it's a very similar sort of thing. You get your business going, and then you become that new business if you can be successful.
Right. And it takes time. It takes time. Okay. What can you offer new authors in terms of marketing or advertising? How can you help the small guy out?
Okay, so generally, I would say it's an economy of scale at all levels. So, there's 2 main areas, to be brief. The distribution. Let me put it this way: if you want to do it yourself, you're free to do it, but your spare bedroom will be full of 1,000 books, and you will have to go to the post office every day and pay full price for the postage and the envelopes. And then remember that some of these people are going to be returning books to you, and you're going to have to be administering that back into your spare bedroom and deciding which ones you can sell again and which ones you can't. Anybody who tries that very quickly realizes what we do in distribution. And there are some people that have done that. So we've got an economy of scale there. We can deal with anything in the distribution channel seamlessly because we do it every day. And there are problems, but we're used to all of the problems that happen there, and they happen constantly. And that's, just taking that away. So the author publisher is actually doing nothing. They are paying for it. You're a passive, you're making a passive income, but let's remember it's passive. It's like being a landlord, really.
All right. So as when you publish the product, you have the printed product, we send it to you, and you take care of everything else, and you just send a check.
And just send a check, usually twice a year. Yeah.
Twice a year.
So, and the bigger the check, the happier we are, because it means we're selling more of the book. So we want to pay you more because that means we're making more as well. So, and in terms of marketing, the economy of scale side of it is you're on the website, you go into the book trade through all of the established channels. You have a chance of getting into bookshops, but that's a kind of a poison chalice anyway. And we publish a catalogue if you're exclusive with us, and we really put most of our efforts into those exclusive titles in things that we do that are marketing. But as I said before, marketing is a dangerous place anyway, because it's a very emotive place with a lot of different opinions. A lot of those opinions come from people who have never practiced marketing. And whether it's good to send an email, use Facebook, Google Ads, a printed catalogue, a pamphlet in the post, or whatever, a video, a CM on TV, I can get an opinion on each one of those that says they're the best thing and they're the worst thing. So we just have to make decisions on that.
Okay. Is there something in the chat first before, because we're almost out of time?
No, that's it. We got 2 minutes, well, 1 minute left, but there's no other questions so far.
Okay, does anyone have a question? You can just turn your mic on, and this is your chance.
Really fascinating, guys. Thank you.
Oh, thanks for coming, Paul. I'll see you next Saturday, I guess.
3 weekends in a row.
Yeah, I'd like to say thank you for coming. It's nice to talk to you all. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, Colin, thank you very much for doing this. We really appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
And I'll see you at the next conference, I guess, whenever that happens in face-to-face.
Well, I'll be hanging around in the EME over here. It's actually not over here. It's on the webpage, the PanSig webpage. But.
Okay, let's give a round of applause to Colin, because I think he did a great job. Oh, go ahead, Forrest.
Yeah, if everybody could turn their mics on and then clap. Okay.
Okay,
Right.
ready? 3, 2, 1.
Thank you very
Yes.
much. Very nice. let's not forget John, who's put this together and kept the structure and kept it on time. Thanks a lot, John.
Okay, my pleasure,
John.
my pleasure. I enjoyed doing it.
Okay, guys, I have a couple of things to say. I'm going to stop recording, and please visit our sponsors and the SIGs in the main lobby. I guess, oh,